Hi everybody, it's Maya Zahira here, and let me see if I can adjust the camera a little bit. Okay, so we are on a Facebook Live right now, and this is our monthly class that's on the Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. And again, my name's Maya Zahira. This class that we are doing this evening is how entities keep you hooked. So that's I'm really excited to go over all of this content with you. It's really fascinating. And I have like this whole page of notes, so you'll have to forgive me for looking down sometimes because I want to make sure that I cover everything and get right to the point. Before we get into the content, let me go ahead and give you my website information and info about what it is that I do, and then we'll jump right in. While I'm covering this stuff, now might be a good time to grab a pen and paper because I think you might want to write some of this stuff down, take some notes. Hey everybody, as you're joining, if you could tell us where you're joining from. So city, state, and country would be excellent. Okay, so my website is www.psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. Excuse me. And what do? I help people who are having issues with sensitivity to energies, and I also help people who are experiencing unwanted paranormal activity. So if you fall into any of that, then this is your video, okay? And even if you've never had any paranormal experiences with entities, ghosts, that sort of thing, this is actually really important information to help you navigate the world and to understand, chances are there are people in your world who have this issue of entities, spirits, ghosts, spiritual beings attached to them. And wow, this is awesome. So many people joining us. Hi, everybody. This problem is more common than you might think. Stick with us through this important content. Okay. And I want to just throw this in here that I know you're here at this live class or you're watching the replay because something about the title grabbed your attention. I want to acknowledge, excuse me, it's winter, it's cold season. I want to acknowledge that when I very first started doing live videos, I used to not cover anything that was too intense. Like I wouldn't even do a free class, a free Facebook Live. Oh, Anne, you're saying not getting live, just stationary pick. I am not sure. I hope you can hear me, Anne. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me and if you can see me okay. All right, so we'll do a sound and video check. So back when I first started doing these free videos, I was doing softer techniques, or I was doing softer topics like what are angels and things like that. And I still like doing those softer topics, but I've given myself permission to cover some of the more intense topics because it's time and because there are people who need this stuff. You need to know about this, and that's why you're here. So, and thanks for all the thumbs ups, whatever, everybody. Okay, so I hope you all grabbed a pen and paper because we're going to dive right in. Now, before we get into how entities keep you hooked, as I was writing notes for the content for this, I realized that I really needed to go over some of the basics with you, like what are entity attachments? Hey, Zahira. And Marla is saying, Anne, you may need to reconnect in order to get the video as well. Okay, so, and Luke is saying, hi, Maya, traveling this week in Spokane, Washington. Awesome, safe travels. So I realized that we need to go over some of the basics before we get into the why entities keep you hooked. Because we have people of all different experience levels watching this video. So again, I have a lot of notes, so you'll have to excuse me for looking down and following my notes. Okay, so let's start off with the basics. Like, what are these things that we're talking about? Entity attachments. So entity attachments are spiritual beings that are attached to a person. Okay? So there's all sorts of different types of spiritual beings that exist. And going into those would be beyond the scope of this class, because then we'd be going down a whole other rabbit hole. But just suffice it to say that there are many different types of entities, from friendly ghosts to maybe mischievous ghosts, to evil spirits, to demonic entities, to all sorts of other types of spiritual beings. Okay? So when I mention entity attachments, I'm just kind of lumping all of these entities all together in one category. But just know that all entity attachments are unhealthy. So a lot of people say, well, I have a friendly spirit that's attached to me. They might be friendly. Like, it's good that they're not an evil spirit, because that would be more problematic. But even friendly spirits are sourcing your life force energy. Do you want that? Like, that is the truth. They are not helping you, or they might think that they're helping you, but what they're doing is sucking life force energy, because they have to get life force energy from somewhere, and whoever they're hooked into, that's who they're going to get it from. So when I say entities, I'm lumping it all together for simplicity's sake during this class. So what does an entity attachment mean? What do I mean? We talked about what an entity means, but attachment, what does that mean? So my definition is that the entity is in your energy field or right outside of it, and it has a cord, like an electrical cord or a hose, that is hooked, that is attached from it to you. And that's what I mean by attached. It is plugged into you via this cord. Now, everything that we're going to talk about tonight, though, would apply to if an entity is attached to you. So it's here and it's plugged into you and it's having an impact on you. Or if it's not, if it's worse than an attachment, but it is actually inside you. Okay, which technically is possession. And I would consider, if a spirit is inside of you, I consider that to be a possession. So a lot of people think of a possession as only if it's a demon. But my terminology is, if it is inside you and not out here, if it is inside your physical body, then it is possessing you. It might not be in charge all the time. It might be it might be running the show sometimes, and sometimes you're running the show. But either way, it's inside of you. So just clarifying terminology there. And with everything that I'm going to go through, like how they keep you hooked, that would be if it's an attachment, what I call an attachment, or if it's a possession, or even if it's an infestation, which is that it's not necessarily even attached to you, but it's like all the various entities all over your house, but they're not actually plugged into you. That would be an infestation. So everything that I'm talking about would apply, but for simplicity's sake, I'm using the term entity attachments. Okay. So I want to point out again that that entity attachments and entity infestations and possession, it's all more common than you think. So, I mean, it's not like 1 in 100 people have an entity attachment. It's like almost, I would say everybody has. I've never met someone who didn't at some point have at least some issue with it at one point in their life. And I'll get into how you can get entity attachments in just a little bit. Some people have more problems with them than others, and that's really what I'm addressing today, but it's really an issue for everybody. Okay, so it's more common than you think. And about the entity attachments, I want to explain that oftentimes with the energy cord that's attached from it to the person, it's often a two-way channel. So by that, I mean it is attached to the person, and the entity attachment, is sucking life force energy. So energy is leaving the person and going to the entity. So it's life force energy, or it could be other kinds of energy like the lower vibration entities really like to feed off of the energy of suffering. So whether it's life force energy, suffering, which is no matter what they're sourcing, it's still life force energy that they're pulling. So it's going that direction, away from the person to the entity. And but it's often a two-way channel. So also the entity is sending energy most of the time, but not always. It's always sucking energy, but a lot of times it's also sending not positive energy, but it's sending manipulative thoughts, negative belief systems. Basically what it's trying to do is lower depending on what kind of entity it is. If it's a lower vibration entity, it's sending energy to lower your vibration, to lower your thoughts, to lower your emotions, to stir up suffering, to stir up addictive feelings and patterns and behaviors, so that it can feed off of that. Okay, so it sends energy in thoughts, manipulation, all of that, well, in order to manipulate you. Okay, and then it's sucking life force energy. So it's a two-way channel, okay, with the entity attachment. And so let's see here. So with my own clients who come to me for energy clearing, to clear out these entity attachments, the ways that they know that there's something happening, that they suspect there might be an entity, is that they have a feeling of being watched all the time, or just a feeling that there's something with them. Some people, excuse me, some people will have strange dreams. Some people will experience a lot of paranormal activity, and some people will even catch that on camera, paranormal activity around them. Some people will hear a voice or voices, either externally, like someone is in the room with them, speaking to them, or they'll hear it in their own mind, but it's not coming from them. Sometimes it seems like it is their own thoughts, because it's in their voice, so they don't realize that it's not them, it's the entity. And sometimes it's in the entity's voice. But more times than not, what I've observed is that people will think that it's their own thoughts, because it is in their own voice. It's just like their own thoughts, right? And that's unfortunately, a very effective way that the entities manipulate people. Sometimes people will recognize that they have an entity attachment because they will feel like they're being touched, or even pushed or shoved. Some people will have physical exhaustion. Like there are just times when they will lose energy, but they have no idea why. Well, you know why? It's because the entity is sucking life force energy, so that's why. And then for some people, especially those who are healing addiction, some people will have overpowering urges, especially related to whatever their addiction is. And this is also a sign that there's entity manipulation. Okay. Now, all of these things could happen even if there wasn't an entity. It could be, you're just feeling funny that day or whatever. It doesn't always mean that there's an entity attachment. You feel something on your shoulder, and it was actually, you're outside during the night. Well, maybe it was actually a bug that landed on your shoulder. So it's always good to be prudent and rule out any normal, natural reasons for these things. However, these are common symptoms that people do report. And the other way that we find out if someone has entity attachments is through working with an experienced psychic or intuitive, clairvoyant, medium, etc. Somebody with those spiritual skills, like myself, who can tune in and identify if you have entity attachments, and if so, how many, and even identify what kind they are, and then work to remove them, and then heal your energy field. So, important question, like why are entities hooked into people? Like, why is that even happening? So there's a few different reasons. So one common reason why entities attach to people is because the person has past trauma. And what happens is there are distortions and damaged areas in the person's energy field as a result of unresolved past trauma. It could be physical trauma, emotional trauma from the past, but it's like a weak spot. It makes it very easy for entities to hook in. It's an easy target. So I want to read this comment here before I go on to the next thing on the list. Tina Thomas says, I have felt like I'm being watched, and I often wake up feeling drained. There's a spot in my kitchen where I get dizzy and I feel a presence. Sorry for the big finger. I'm doing this on my phone, you guys, and I feel a presence around sometimes. Yes, those are all symptoms of at least entity presence. And I'd be happy to work with you, and we can identify if it's actually hooked into you and what's going on. Okay, so I'm really glad that you're here. All right, so why do entities attach to people? The first thing that we talked about was past trauma. Now, physical trauma would be if you were in an accident, that can cause rifts in your energy field, or even if you had a surgery, that can be traumatic for your energy body as well. And then there's life traumas, there's grief situations. You're welcome. There's grief situations, there's breakups, there's abuse, there's being the victim of a crime. All sorts of different kinds of traumas can cause weak spots, missing areas where your aura is actually missing, where it's just like open space. There can be fissures, all sorts of things, and so it makes you an easy target. And I could go on and on about that, all the different things that could happen to a person's energy field. But just suffice it to say that it's easier for someone to, it's easier for an entity to hook in when there's damage. Okay, and it's also like an energy imprint in your energy field, so that it's an energetic match. like if you've been traumatized before, then it makes you the victim it makes you a match for being a victim again. Okay, so that's why. And we're still on the first, why does it hook in? Because we've got more on this list, but I see some more comments. Marla is saying, as a medium, aren't you allowing an entity to attach so you can gain specific information? Wow, so I assume that's a great question. No. I'm laughing because it's like, oh my God. So me personally, I'm OCD about not letting entities attach to me. I do not allow them to attach. But basically, it's like, imagine that I'm standing there looking on and observing, like, who is this entity? And I can see and I will receive information, but I'm not receiving it via an energy cord of it hooking into me. Absolutely not. I recommend don't ever do that. Don't ever let any entities hook into you. Actually, never, never, never. Hopefully I answered your question there. So with the work that I do, I don't hook into the entities or allow them to hook into me. Imagine it as like remote viewing. So I'm just like, I'm tuning in and getting info from the quantum field, but I'm not hooking in to that entity. And Tina is saying something, but I think it got cut off. I have been through something. That's a great question, though, Marla. I'm so glad that you asked it. Yeah, I'm sure that there actually are some mediums out there that do hook into spirits and even will allow entities to attach to them and even come into them so they can do channeling work. And some of you know that I am very against that. Like, I'm gonna like start like spitting at the camera because I'm very against that. Like, just be logical here. Do you want entities entering into your body? Now, I say this with all the utmost respect. If there's anybody who watches this who does channeling, I channel messages, but I receive. It's more like a dictation. Like, and I'm also very careful who's going to dictate to me. I don't just work with any old entities. But like my angels, for example, they don't come into me and speak through me. They dictate to me, or they send me thoughts or understandings, and then I put it into words. So it's more like automatic dictation rather than automatic writing or channeling. So anyway, we got off a little bit, but really important because channeling is so popular right now, isn't it? I'm just checking the time. It's very popular right now, and I don't have a problem with receiving messages from entities that you have vetted and that you know are high vibrational entities that are who they say they are, because there's a lot of imposter entities out there too. I have no problem with receiving, with all of you receiving spiritual messages. I think that is a wonderful thing, but there's a distinction between receiving spiritual messages and between that and allowing entities to plug into you or enter into you. I think that is actually very dangerous. And again, I respectfully acknowledge that I'm in disagreement with some people out there. This is based on my own work and my own experiences and what I observe as a clairvoyant and intuitive. So, okay, so let's get back to our list here. Why do entities hook into people? We talked about past traumas that make you vulnerable energetically. And past traumas also, by the way, when someone has had past trauma, A lot of times it causes them to not have very good boundaries in their personal life. Is that you? Would that maybe describe you? But that also includes energetic boundaries. So when somebody has had past trauma, a lot of times they end up having poor personal boundaries. Like people take advantage of them very, very easily. And they also have poor energetic boundaries. So it's all one and the same. Okay, so that's the first reason why entities hook into people. Reason number 2 is that an entity with a similar issue to you might plug in, might connect to you. So an entity with a similar issue, whether it's an emotional issue, a physical issue, a life issue, whatever it is, an entity is discarnate human is like walking along, you're walking along, and it's like, oh, it recognizes that you have things in your vibration that match it. And so it's like two magnets that pull together. It's a vibrational match. And sometimes, though, it's not exactly that you have the same issue. It can be, but related to that is that the entity sees that you're having an issue and it wants to help. So this is something that I've seen, pretty frequently when I've identified that someone had an entity that attached to them when they were a child going through a difficult situation, and this entity wanted to help them. And remember that just because an entity thinks that it's trying to help you doesn't mean that it actually is helping you. So remember, anytime an entity is attached to you, it's not good for it and it's not good for you. It should be moving on to the light. And also it being attached to you is sucking your life force energy. So that is not good for either of you. Okay, number 3, why do entities hook onto people? It can be related to an ancestral pattern. So sometimes there's a pattern going back in the family of people having issues with entity attachments. Now, related to this, sometimes people can have these ancestral patterns because there is a past curse or some kind of black magic that's been placed on the family. There's a variety of reasons why the ancestral pattern could be an issue. It could also be an issue because someone in the past ancestry made a vow of personal suffering, a vow of being a victim, or even a vow to the dark arts, a satanic vow. I know that's all freaky, but those are some reasons why a person might have an entity hooked into them. Now remember, it could be as simple as a past surgery, a past trauma where there was damage in your energy field and it was easy for an entity to hook in. And then when you get into, some of the real freaky stuff where there was, some kind of ancestral pattern, a curse, the more, I think it's more scary sounding stuff. That can be the case as well. Before I go on to the next one, let's read. Tina Thomas says, I was told by a psychic medium recently she felt something wrong in my kitchen. She had no idea of my dizzy spells in the kitchen. She said she sensed something wanting to argue with me, and it's not nice. She wanted to smudge my flat to get rid of it. All right, so thank you for sharing that. And I have 2 comments on this. The first is that, and I need to add this to my list. Dizziness is it's another symptom of an entity. Actually, my observation is that it's a symptom, it's an indicator that an entity is actively hooking in. So, if there's an entity that comes and goes, when it's coming back into your field, it literally lowers your vibration. And anytime your vibration goes through a big, quick change, you will feel dizzy or lightheaded or wobbly or shaky, woozy, all of that. So that is, oops, I can't see this. So that's what I would say. I would just affirm for you that those dizzy spells, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say, make sure you run that issue by your doctor when you go for your doctor's visit. Make sure that everything's okay physically. That's just a prudent thing to do. But the dizziness is a symptom of a very quick change in your vibration, and that would be an indicator of an entity actively hooking in. The other thing, you commented about sage. So those of you who've been in my group for a long time know that I'm preaching this all the time. So it's very, very popular right now. It's a very popular belief that sage works to clear everything out. But I know from firsthand experience that, 95% of the time, sage does not work in clearing out some of the more powerful entities. What I've observed is that sage will usually work if you are just going around and blessing your house and you have friendly ghosts or real easy types of spiritual energy, like residual stress energy that's hanging out in the house from like stress from work, or the kids fighting, fight with your spouse, stuff like that. Just like your generalized energy, sage is really good at clearing that. It tends to work to raise the vibration in a very lovely way. It creates negative ions in the space, and they've scientifically proven that. And the negative ions are a positive thing. That's a very good thing. That raises the vibration, and by default, then it moves out anything that is, the easier negative energies. When you're working with trying to clear out the more powerful energies or the more stubborn entities, then don't be surprised that sage it rarely works. So then you have to use more powerful tools. Okay, so I'm always preaching that because people are recommending sage all the time, but have you ever noticed that it didn't work? Like it doesn't work, but you might feel a little bit better because it is helping to cleanse some of your own negative energy, because we all have that. We have residual stress and other stuff. So keep that in mind, okay? And no offense to the medium who recommended that you burn sage, because like everybody recommends that. I see it everywhere. I get really frustrated with it too, because there's so many techniques that are taught or that people recommend that don't even work. But the idea sounds really nice. So it's like, well, of course that would work. That sounds lovely. Burn some sage. But in reality, it doesn't even work. So FYI. And I have not forgotten about the rest of my list here, but we're going to questions right here. Tina says, I was told that in a past life that I was a witch practicing the black arts. I was told I was a powerful witch. Could what's happening now have anything to do with that past life? So I'll first say that I'm focusing on content, so I'm not actively tuning in intuitively to you right now, but that could be that is what we do in a session, just FYI for everybody watching. So I am able to tune in and identify what's going on and the cause and everything. So I could verify that for you. But what I will say generally is that yes, that actually very well could be a cause for unwanted paranormal activity in your life now, if you had experience in this lifetime or a past lifetime with practicing the dark arts. So The answer is yes. Okay. Okay, so who is this? Christina says, so this is a bit off subject, but my dogs have been acting a bit spastic, clingy, and super attentive since I came home Saturday evening. Can they sense my entity? That is not off topic. That is actually on topic. So animals actually do respond quite readily to entities. And so you'll notice that like your pet will look at the wall or look at like nowhere. There's like nobody there, and they start growling or barking or acting hyper or scared or whatever. Yes, that can actually be an indication. And again, I'm not actually reading you intuitively, so I'm not saying that the entity is active, but I'm answering more generally for everybody's sake. But you and I can definitely connect later, and we can see what's going on. Okay. We have a lot of comments tonight. If you're waiting for the rest of the content, be patient because I have not forgotten where we are at. Tina Thomas says, the psychic lady said she thought there was a portal in my kitchen. Okay. So she's definitely in the know because portals are one way that entities can come and go. And I'm not going to evaluate whether you do or don't at this time, but that definitely can be a cause for entities to come through. And Marla is saying, yes, animals can sense activity earlier than we humans notice. Animals will give us warning signs, so listening to them is important. Yes. Tina says, yes, Marla, my dog senses things. I sometimes see him just watching one spot, staring at nothing, and sometimes he will growl at thin air. I think he's seeing something I can't see. And I'm getting a definite yes on that. He is for sure. Marla is saying, locating active portals is necessary to remove activity. You may need advanced assistance depending on what is creating the portal. Yep. And you guys, Marla just recently moved away, like literally a couple days ago, but she was my assistant when I would go out and do house clearings. So listen to what she says. She knows her stuff. She's awesome. All right, so back to why do entities hook into people? We talked about past trauma making you more vulnerable. The entity could have a similar issue to you, so it's a vibrational match, or they're trying to help somebody who has an issue. They hook in because they feel bad. They're trying to help. We talked about ancestral patterns. Also, another reason why entities might hook into a person is if checking our time, if the person is a light worker. So light worker is a broad term that I'm using to describe someone who either consciously, whether they're conscious of it or not, they have a powerful mission in life to bring light and love and God's truth, or whatever it is that you call the divine, to the planet, to activate positive change. People who are doing spiritual work, people who are healers, spiritual teachers, leaders, church clergy, etc. Okay, those people often get attacked or either actively attacked or entity attachments in order to pull them down, to keep them from being fully capable of doing their life mission, their light mission. Okay. So when people say, a person would only have an entity attachment if they're a low vibration, well, that's not always the case, because sometimes people who have a very high vibration, who have a very pure life purpose to bring so much good into the world, people, even there's a long history, and there's books and books about the saints who were harassed by dark entities because of who they were. So keep that in mind. Another reason why entities might hook into a person is because the person has an addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or any other addiction. And I won't go through the whole list, but there's a lot of different things a person can be addicted to. If the entity, so I'm really talking here about a human being who has passed on, who's in the astral realm, but has not moved on to the other side. When I say other side, whatever tradition that you believe in, whether it's heaven or to be with the divine, okay? So they haven't moved on all the way. They are still in the astral plane. They're still walking the earth. They had that person, when they were alive, they had an addiction, and a lot of times they don't want to move on to the other side because the addiction is so strong. They want to stay connected with the earth plane so that they can still experience their addictive behavior. So how they do that is they hook into a person who has the same addiction, and then they encourage that addiction. They feed that person addictive urges, thoughts, feelings to get them to participate in that addiction. Now, it's not always the exact same addiction. Could be an alcoholic plugs into a drug addict or a food addict or a sex addict or whatever. But my observation is that a lot of the time it's the same type of addiction. Not always, though. Let's see. Anything else I want to say on that? So just an example about the addiction, why entities want to hook into people who are addicted, who have addictive patterns. So actually a person might not even be partaking in their addictive behavior. They might just have that in their energy field. Maybe it's in their genetics. Maybe alcoholism is in their genes. They have not had issues with alcoholism in the past or in the present, but then this entity comes along that says, hey, this person has alcoholism in their energy right here, and let me hook in, and that's when the alcoholism starts. Okay? Or it could be somebody who already is having addiction issues, and then it's real obvious. It's like a moth to a flame. The entity really wants to hook into that person. When I don't go into bars very often because there's so many entities in bars, but I will tell you what I've observed clairvoyantly through my psychic vision, and it's that when people are drunk, and I just want to say, this is not a moral evaluation. I'm not saying whether you should drink or not drink, but I'm telling you what I see clairvoyantly. Okay, so when people are drunk, not just a sip of wine, but like drunk, their spirit is outside of their body because their spirit doesn't like that physical state. So their spirit is like up here or over there. It's not in their body. And because they're not home, the person isn't home. It's very easy for entities to actually step right in and take control of the person's body, either temporarily or stays with them. And for this, it's really interesting but every one-on-one client that I've worked with who has been in recovery or actively in addiction, I've always found multiple entity attachments. Okay, so that's what's going on with that. So that's one reason why, somebody can be trying so hard to quit their addiction and to heal that, but it's more than just willpower, because if you imagine this person has entities, usually it's more than one, that are pushing those urges, okay? So they can try so hard to quit that addictive behavior, but then they have, all of this energetic pressure around them that's literally manipulating them and controlling them. So it's very difficult. Okay, so now into our, why we're really here. We want to know about how they keep you hooked, how these entities keep you hooked. So we've talked about what entity attachments are, what the indicators can be for entity attachments, and why they hook in the first place. And now let's get into how they can keep a person hooked. I thought about I had the idea for this topic a couple of weeks ago because I see this. My cat is now here. Those of you who've met her, she's so friendly, but she does the claw on the leg thing. So stop. No. Okay, you guys. We've got a real moment. Her claw was hooked into my leg. That was no fun. Oh, talk about it. Kitty attachment. Okay, back to our lesson. So I thought a couple of weeks ago I had the idea for covering this because I notice it so frequently in people that I interact with who are either clients or students or potential clients. And so this is not in any way coming from a place of judgment. I want to be really clear about that. My intent here is to help educate people, because when you're in the middle of being controlled and manipulated by an entity or entities, it's really hard to hear somebody who's telling you the truth about what's going on, because you're in the middle of being manipulated. So I think it'll make more sense once I go on and explain this next part. Okay, so this way, by having this information, you'll know about it ahead of time. So if this does happen to you, then you'll be able to identify it and you'll go, oh, I see what's happening. And that disengages the power of it. And Jill says, the feline entity had you hooked. Yeah, she's an angel. That's the entity that she is. I call her Angel. Kitesh is her name. Oh, she's a chubby little furry angel. So how they keep you hooked. Before I go into the list of how they keep you hooked, I want to explain that their intention is to manipulate. Why do they want to manipulate? Because they want to stay hooked. They like being hooked to that person, whoever it may be. They don't want to leave, so they want to encourage their host. Yeah, I haven't used that word. I don't use that word very often, but that's the right word. They want to encourage the host to not do whatever activity, appointment, class, whatever it is. They want to encourage their host to not do that, to not do whatever it is that's going to cause the entity to be released. So here are the things that the entity or entities will do to so that they can stay hooked into their host. Number one, the entities will stir up life drama, whether it's extra busyness or other kind of life drama, difficulties that on the surface might appear to be normal life circumstances that are caused by just life. Stuff happens. But really what's happening is stuff is getting stirred up in your life in order to distract you so that you feel so overwhelmed with this drama or busy or whatever, so that you feel like you don't have time or you forget about working on the entity issues because you're so busy dealing with this crap over here or these difficult, hard situations. Your focus is on this. Okay? So they literally will bring drama situations into your life, whether it's unnecessary drama, like I've had situations where, people who have been a cloud of drama in the past, where it's like they're just creating drama from thin air that's like not even necessary stuff. Like I won't hear from them for a long time, and then when I'm getting ready to do an important some important work, working against the dark, like the drama person will show up. It's like they just show up. I'm not talking about just one, but you have those people in your life, right? People that suck your energy, or they just come along with drama. So that is so the unnecessary drama kind of stuff. That what happens is the entity that's attached to you goes and pokes that person and says, "Hey, you should call her," or whatever. You should stir this up, and they don't even know that they're being manipulated to come into your life. So that's what I call unnecessary drama. But then there's more difficult situations like serious illness, death, relationship breakups, and things like that. Okay, but all of that's life drama that then creates resistance, so that you don't really want to focus on the healing work that you were going to do to clear out the entity. Just checking my time here. All right, so number 2, they will manipulate emotionally and mentally. So what they'll do, remember I said they will actually like hook it, they'll stand near the person, they'll hook in, and what I will see clairvoyantly often is that they'll actually talk into the person's ear. And even though it'll be received as thoughts in their own mind, that they think are their own thoughts, or feelings that they think are their own feelings, it's actually coming from the entity attachment. So they will be negative thoughts, depression, self-doubt, or, very important here, doubt about whoever is helping them to release the entity, or discomfort with whoever it is who's helping them release the entity, or trust issues. It'll say things like into its ear, "You can't trust her," or him, whatever healer or shaman or whoever it is that you might be preparing to work with, then that entity is going to be like, "You shouldn't go to that person," and gives you these trust issues, negative thoughts, or lack of motivation kind of feelings, like all of that, the emotional, mental stuff, whatever your weak points are. Like if you have trust issues, if that's your weak point, it's going to go for that. If depression is your weak point, it's going to go for that. Okay, if lack of motivation is your weak point, it's going to go for that. All right, so it's going to work with your emotional and mental aspects to manipulate you into not doing the healing work. Okay. It's also going to, the entity or entities are also going to encourage a lack of boundaries. So I see some people are like, it's like they're getting this constant download of, I'll give you an example. I know someone who has so many negative entities attached to her. And of course, I'm not giving any identifying information here, but she's constantly channeling and receiving messages about how we are all one, which we're all one. We are all one, and boundaries are not necessary, and you should not have boundaries of any kind. So that's what this entity keeps feeding. The entities keep feeding to her, there's nothing. She's kind of beyond help at this point. I feel really bad. This is not a client, but it's someone that I've encountered. So the lack of boundaries, it'll feed thoughts that support not having boundaries. And it'll put it in a pretty package, like spiritual teachings of like, we're all one and la 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 la. And you shouldn't have any boundaries, right? And it's okay to have entities attached to you because the entities are pretending to be ascended masters or whatever. I do believe in authentic ascended masters, by the way, but there are a lot of entities that are pretending to be something that they're not. FYI, that is just a fact. Okay, and then they will also try to keep you hooked through causing physical issues, like sucking so much of your life force all at once that you're so exhausted that you don't even have the energy to go on that retreat or that nature thing that you're going to do or the healing session to heal yourself and release the entity. They make you so exhausted that you just can't even do it. So exhausted, tired, sick, etc. All of a sudden you come down with the flu or a cold or whatever. Okay, so you can't go to the session. And then the last one on the list is addiction, how they will keep you hooked. If a person does have addiction issues, then the entity will activate that addiction even more. I've seen this so many times where I will be working with, doing healing sessions with someone who is recovering from an addiction. We work to remove some of the entities that are attached to them. But then between this session and the next session, the entities come back and then the person relapses. And then they definitely get any more help. So it's definitely a challenging journey because they will do whatever they can to keep somebody hooked. And one of the most common things that I see is the mental and emotional, where, and I didn't talk about this the first time around. Another thing that entities will do is they will stir up your triggers so that whoever it is that's trying to help you, you will be so triggered and stirred up and so pissed off at them that you end your relationship with them, or you at least withdraw, and it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And so with that being said, can you see how when someone's in the middle of being manipulated, there's nothing that anyone can say to them or point it out to them to help them understand, because they're so, because they can't see it, because they're in the middle of being manipulated. So this is why I like to teach about these things. So if you know about it ahead of time, then in the moment when it happens, then you already have that awareness and you go, oh, this is a manipulation that's happening. I see I'm being triggered on purpose to keep me from coming to this appointment or whatever. Okay. So with this knowledge, now you'll be able to identify when something is trying to keep you hooked in. Okay. So that was a lot of info. That was over an hour. I do see we have some comments. So let's go through this real quick. And then I have a client after this, so then I will have to go. Zach says, this is so crazy. I have loved weightlifting and bodybuilding for years, and all of a sudden I had no desire to do it. And now we have all of our paranormal events happening, and this feels like exactly... Can I get it? Oh shoot. Can't see the rest of your message. There. And this feels like exactly what has happened. That's quite possible. So now that you're aware of it, you can go, aha, I see what you're doing. I'm going to still go work out. So it's awesome when you, at least, it's like when you have that awareness, like when the drama starts to happen and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? This person's upset me or whatever. And then you go, oh, it's just, it's just the entity, or it's just the whatever, and you go, it's just trying to stir me up. I get it. And then it loses a lot of its power when you suddenly realize what's happening. Okay, so Luke says, can this also apply to work scenarios? Definitely, it can apply to any scenario in your life. Okay, we got more comments coming in. So it can be relationships, at home, at work, at the gas station, getting gas. I mean, anywhere. Jeannie says, very informative, Maya. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Zahira, thank you so much, Maya. I need to leave for an appointment. See you next time, Zahira. And hey, Lauren, nice to see you. So we are just winding things down with our class. If you didn't catch the whole thing, we covered a ton. Like, this was probably one of my most packed classes. So if you didn't see the whole thing, I encourage you to go back to the beginning and watch from the start. And you're probably going to want to take notes. And then for those who missed the very beginning, my name's Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary. And I help people who are dealing with energetic sensitivities like empaths and HSPs. And I also help people who are experiencing unwanted paranormal activity, personal unwanted paranormal activity, and activity in their home. So I do personal clearings and I do house clearings and I teach classes. So this is one of my free classes. Right now, the free Facebook Live classes in 2008, so 2018. Oh my gosh, I just lost 10 years. In 2018, so far my plan is to have our free Facebook Live classes the first Monday evening every month. So, and of course the replays are always posted. My website is www.psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, and you can go to the website and enter your name and email and receive some free gifts, including a quiz. Are you vulnerable to psychic attack? And there's also a free guided meditation and some information about empaths. And there's also hours and hours of free video classes on my website as well. So go over there right now and check it out. And for those of you who are needing personal help with this, feel free to send me a message. And we can set up a consultation and see how I can help you out. Everybody have a great night. Thank you so much for joining, and see you next time. Bye.